Hello, today is Monday, November 6th, 2023, and welcome to episode 272 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm Senior Fellow Lester Munson, and I'm joined today by NSI founder and Executive Director Jamil Jaffer and Deputy Executive Director and occasional street fighting heroine Jessica Jones.
Worth noting that Les and I are in the same room today.
We are.
It's unusual.
Yeah. And
Jessica, unfortunately, couldn't join us.
I was
and sitting right next to each other. We're also sharing AirPods. There's a lot going on
Okay,
here.
awkward. Why would you tell people that? So weird.
All right. No laughing matter. We are going to talk about the ongoing crisis in the Middle East and the very strange happenings in internal American politics that I think are directly related to it. So, quick overview of what's been happening in the last few days. The Israeli move into Gaza has been ongoing. There's been a lot of reports about the humanitarian crisis, the number of Palestinians who have been killed. We're not necessarily going to directly address that, but that is, of course, those, of course, are major concerns, the situation with respect to hostages. There's a lot going on the ground in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Biden administration, senior folks, the director of the CIA, Bill Burns, the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, are on the move in the region, having meetings. They were in Amman, meeting with Arab leaders to talk about the situation in Gaza. Blinken went to Ramallah in the West Bank to meet with Abu Mazen to discuss various things. He also went to
Abu Mazen being the leader.
The leader of Fatah, which is a kind of alternative Palestinian political organization to Hamas. Not a terrorist organization, notably, certainly with some flaws and some issues and things we can talk about. Deep flaws, but not at the level of Hamas by a real quick analysis. Also, Blinken went to Baghdad to meet with Prime Minister al-Sudani to talk about, again, probably similar issues. One of the things going on here, frankly, Jamil and Jessica, is the administration is talking about not only the current crisis, but what the governance structure will be in Gaza when the crisis ends, which, God willing, is quick. It may not be, but let's hope it's quick. But there's got to be a kind of an out plan for who's in charge of Gaza when the Israeli move there against Hamas is over. That is clearly something that is going on behind the scenes, in addition to all of the public discussions we've seen. Now, meanwhile, some amazing things happened this weekend. Former President Barack Obama. Here at home in Washington, Barack Obama, former president, decided it was a good time to talk about his views of the crisis. He said, effectively, everyone is to blame for the crisis in the Middle East, which is an interesting and I think terrible approach and does not lead you to any kind of good decision making. And his former main political operative, David Axelrod, who ran Barack Obama's first campaign in 2008 and was kind of the intellectual father of the re-elect, who is the most senior political operative in Obama world, basically said Joe Biden probably shouldn't run again. Now, he didn't phrase it exactly that way, but that was the message. So while the Biden administration is dealing with a major global crisis in the Middle East that is of incredible difficulty and a lot of issues being contemplated and a lot of moves on the chessboard, the president's main political ally, his former boss, his patron, decided to completely undermine the efforts of President Biden and his team. Jamil, I am shocked at these developments. What do you say?
I mean, you shouldn't be shocked. President Obama never wanted Joe Biden to be president. He didn't back him the first time. He, in fact, convinced him to stay out of the race after his son, Beau Biden, passed away. And supported Hillary Clinton. So this is no surprise. What's surprising is happening in the context of this crazy world situation. And it's also crazy that Barack Obama, maybe it's not surprising that Barack Obama has a sort of nuanced and intellectual view of this conflict. Everyone's at fault. No one's responsible. I mean, it's ridiculous. There is one party responsible for what's happening in Gaza right now, and it is Hamas. Hamas came across the border, murdered 1,400 people in a single day, the equivalent of a dozen 9/11s. There is no cause for saying, for creating any sort of moral equivalence between the kind of terrorism that Hamas engaged in and the now legitimate form of self-defense that Israel is practicing, right? We can all talk about the plight of the Palestinian people and what needs to be done, and the long-term solution, a two-state solution, is what is necessary in my view. But the idea that the question of whether everyone's responsible for what's happening is ridiculous. And Barack Obama should just keep his mouth shut and just focus on the knitting.
Jones, there's a polling that shows support for Israel is lowest among young Americans. Those in the kind of the college cohort, 18 to 24, are much more willing to kind of take the side of Hamas in this conflict. Not a majority, but a very significant minority. These are the progressives. These are voters who are on the left. They are who the Democrats are going to need to win an election next year. What are your thoughts about what Obama said and American politics and what we're likely to see next year?
So what I think is interesting about Obama's comments, regardless of what he thought about Joe Biden in the first place becoming president, I just wonder what's the next step there, though. Criticizing President Biden right now leads to what? We're coming up to an election year. Who does he think is going to replace replace Biden in running? Who has the power to do, who has the popularity? I don't know. Is it Michelle? I don't know what he's doing. So I just wonder what the long-term play is there when you open the door to that level of criticism. I was actually reading a few interesting pieces this week speaking to kind of the movements on college campuses and the younger generation. And, one of the things that we've discussed a little on the show is that a lot more younger folks are getting their information from TikTok and other social media platforms, right? And it's no surprise. I think it was Chairman Gallagher, Rep. Gallagher wrote a piece on, no surprise, TikTok is owned by the Chinese, of which case you're getting a lot of news that, let's not forget, where they stand, where you're getting slanted news that's, bias that's not been verified. And so I think there's just skepticism and young folks are still figuring out how the world works and geopolitics and where they stand. But I think you're getting a lot of biased information that is not being verified. And just like, the attack on the strike on the hospital, you're taking the first headline that you read, and it's hard to then move off of that. And so I don't think we can downplay where young folks are getting their news.
And look, it really has caused a significant impact on Joe Biden. I mean, he has lost in a month, 11 points in polling within the Democratic Party. I mean, that's a massive problem. It may not result in anything happening to him, writ large, but what it does is it keeps people at home, right? And if this is an election about turnout, which is likely to be, Joe Biden may lose the election purely on the basis not of having been taken out in the primary, which unclear if that's going to happen, but he may just lose on pure turnout numbers because his party base is demotivated.
There is a primary challenger to Joe Biden. It's Dean Phillips. He's a congressman from Minnesota. He's very pro-Israel, and he did a town hall event a few days ago, and basically got shouted down by the crowd for being too pro-Israel. So the Democratic base is not where President Biden is. So I think,
which is crazy, by the way.
Well, I think that's why you have Blinken out there getting all his frequent flyer miles, trying to get some win, whether it's a humanitarian pause to get more aid in, to get civilians out, whether it's an announcement of what's going to happen to Gaza post this conflict, post Israeli operations. They're trying to get some wins on the board because you see a lot of Americans really unhappy.
Yeah, and the crazy thing, Jess, you're exactly right. And they were so close to a major victory, building on what President Trump did with the Abraham Accords, getting Saudi Arabia to recognize Israel. They were weeks away, it sounds like, from that deal, and Hamas knowing it. I mean, I think a lot of this has to do with Hamas and Iran's perception that they were about to get boxed out. And the administration's now signature foreign policy achievement out the door. Their signature foreign policy achievement at this point is bailing out of Afghanistan disastrously and two wars on new fronts.
There's also the story that the attack may have happened even earlier, perhaps on Passover, but Hamas waited, perhaps at Iranian direction, until the Biden administration coughed up the $6 billion for the hostage exchange. I don't know if that's true or not. It would not surprise me.
Worth noting the $6 billion remains frozen. They haven't gotten access to it, but it is in Qatari hands, so they may eventually. You're right.
And, of course, it's a little bit of a distraction from the major issue, which is sanctions relief on Iran has probably unlocked somewhere between $20 and $50 billion for that country. The administration's schizophrenic approach to the Middle East is on trial here.
And China, by the way. It's the same problem on China.
All right, folks, a lot to unpack there, but that's a wrap. Thanks so much to Alex Toki, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us again on Wednesday, November 8th for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debate shaking up America. Fault Lines is now on YouTube, so check out our channel for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.